Chapter 11. Two-sample hypothesis testing. Managers must often decide between two or more alternatives. Fortunately, there are statistical procedures that can help decision makers use sample information to compare alternative choices. This chapter introduces techniques that can be used to make statistical comparisons between two populations. Estimation for two population means using independent samples. This section introduces estimation for those cases involving two population means where independent samples are selected. Techniques for estimating the difference between two population means are presented for each of the following situations. 1. The population standard deviations are known and the samples are independent. 2. The population standard deviations are unknown and the samples are independent. Just as was the case with hypothesis tests involving a single population parameter, two possible errors can occur. Type I error, rejecting H0 when it is true, alpha error. Type 2 error, not rejecting H0 when it is false, beta error. Interval estimation and hypothesis tests for paired samples. There are instances in business where paired samples are used to control for sources of variation that might otherwise distort the estimations for hypothesis tests. Paired samples are samples that are selected in such a way that values in one sample are matched with the values in the second sample for the purpose of controlling for extraneous factors. Paired samples are used in those cases where it is necessary to control for an outside source of variation. Outcome 1. Discuss the logic behind, and demonstrate the techniques for, using independent samples to test hypotheses and develop interval estimates for the difference between two population means. Interval estimation and hypothesis tests for paired samples. There are instances in business where paired samples are used to control for sources of variation that might otherwise distort the estimations for hypothesis tests. Paired samples are samples that are selected in such a way that values in one sample are matched with the values in the second sample for the purpose of controlling for extraneous factors. Paired samples are used in those cases where it is necessary to control for an outside source of variation. Estimation and hypothesis tests for two population proportions. Many business applications involve confidence intervals and hypothesis tests for two population proportions. The general format for confidence interval estimates for the difference between two population proportions is point estimate plus or minus, critical value, standard error. Confidence intervals involving the difference between two population proportions always have a z-value as the critical value. Hypothesis tests for the difference between two population proportions require the calculation of a pooled estimator for the overall proportion. Conclusion. Many decision-making applications require that a confidence interval for the difference between two population parameters be constructed and a hypothesis test for the difference between two population parameters be conducted. This chapter discussed the procedures and techniques for these situations. Figure 11.6 provides a flowchart to assist you in selecting the appropriate procedures for establishing the confidence interval and conducting the hypothesis test when the decision-making situation